2 Fever Dreams. I am on top of a huge pile of sand that's still pouring in through the glassless windows of my bedroom from some sinister astral dump truck. In my hand is a pair of stainless steel tweezers. I know what I must do. I must remove the sand from my room, throwing one sand particle at a time out through my window, using only the tweezers. Only one particle of sand at a time. Use only the tweezers. I begin to perform this Sisyphean task. I'm overwhelmed with the immensity of it all, with the uselessness, the pointlessness, the hopelessness, focusing on one grain of sand at a time, each not much different from the other, becoming aware of it only to discard it and go on to one nearly the same. I see that life is an endless chain of minute and in themselves meaningless sensations, each an individual, yet only a dream state phantom with no shape of itself, only becoming visible in random combination with billions of its own kind, the particle and the whole random and without reason. I continue for what seems to be an eternity, picking up each tiny sand crystal, discarding it out into the blue, with an overpowering sense of melancholy, as the pile of sand never seems to shrink. Suddenly, I'm not in my room anymore, but outside, on the front lawn, I realize, even though it seems like a bizarre rainforest. I am small as a mite, smaller yet, so small the blades of grass are like redwood trees towering up. The microscopic areas of dirt between the grass shoots are like muddy, wide corridors, all brown and soft and thick and sucking and warm. Scattered about, everywhere, caked in mud and huddling near the giant plants of grass are other people like myself. A sense of apprehension and sheer panic fills the air. Without warning, a gigantic boulder hits the ground not far away with a sickening whoop and rolls through the grass like a vengeful steamroller, crushing screaming humans deep into the flattened path that cuts through the jungle. I am in a huge swarm of rushing, tiny humanity running through the jungle of the yard, as all around us fall gargantuan stones, rolling and crushing and forever pursuing us. We are in the land of the giants, with death forever pursuing us. We run and forever try to escape the inevitable, driven out of mind with panic and impulsive avoidance of that which is always present, and forcing us into nothing but random movement to anywhere but here. It never ends. Somewhere in my flight I realize the boulders that are pursuing us are the very same particles of sand I was throwing out of my window in the first dream. On one end, a giant cursed with infinite boredom, nitpicking moron-like through the endless chain of experiences. And on the other end, a tiny, helpless creature unable to face even one particle of reality, driven into a mad, chaotic dance of panic along with the others of my kind. Normal consciousness is somewhere in the middle of these two dream states. After the fever, I returned to the safe middle ground. More or less.
And you know how dreams are. At first they're very vague, and then as they go along, things seem to get clearer. At least that's the way that this dream seemed to be. The longer it went on, the clearer things seemed to become. Except that the things that I thought that I understood, I didn't understand. And things that I thought were good were bad. And certain things that I thought were bad were good. And certain things that people told me weren't true. And certain things that I believed were wrong. And the more that I tried to understand, the less I understood. It all seemed so real. It all seemed so unreal. People were trying to escape, trying to be free. People wanted someone to tell them what to do. People were enslaved and had to work day after day just to buy food and shelter. Life seemed to have no meaning. Life seemed wonderful in my dream. The dream was turning into a nightmare. It seemed so much like a child at the beginning. Happiness in my ignorance. The more I learned, the more of a nightmare it became. The more I thought I understood, the less I knew. The more I knew, the less I wanted to know. I was born, I must die. 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 Help me, I'm suffering. Help me, I'm suffering. Help me, I'm suffering.
Teeth flash and grind. Gnash, squeal, no grease here. Rust levers split, the pins, the shaft tightens on the nut. Cables spring taut and whine, pedal push, each revolution click. Whirring roll. Shiver, frames 1 and 2. Vapor jets through slip valves toward exhaust condensation agent. Special fuel treatment. Spark. Shaft plug. Spark. In the spark. Fan fire. Spark. Spark. Flash. Spark. Spark lights the spark. Worms know. They talk by touch.
As I walked through town, the ground was like a trampoline, and marshmallow substance flowed from the water faucets everywhere. It was all very white and very clean. We had to pay admission to have the privilege of scouring through the ashes of time. One guy found an old clock made of pot metal, burnt and tarnished, with a marine-like form, and over the face it read, "Jaws, the clock." And as we walked up the creaky wooden stairs, ashes rained down on us through the cracks, like being under a pier at the beach. There was a huge auditorium. It was filled with people trying to get out. I found the way because it looked like a door leading to a pasture with cows in it. But we walked right through the image and out to where the rocket ship was parked. It was a real quick trip to the ultimate amusement town. Later, back at home, foreign troops were taking prisoners. We tried to duck down in the kitchen, and as I looked out the window, they spotted us. Soon, we too were taken away, and they wouldn't let me take my toothpicks. I awoke with a start.
Slipping into subconsciousness. There I was again, looking down into the old quarry. Vertical walls all around. about the size of my little finger, looking down at this small flower, wondering whether it was a meal or not. Looking up at the small flower. Was I the small flower, or was I not? Looking up, seeing a wheel of a giant truck bearing down on me. Or was I the truck? I was unsure. All I knew was this truck was going to crush the tiny flower, and I was unsure whether it would or not. And just at the point the wheel crushed the flower, I awoke, glad that I had awoken, and seeing everything was as it always was around me, slipping back into subconsciousness, hearing the sound again, a fierce sound, that we can't actually hear, looking at a small pinhead. The sun permeated the picture. Watching the pinhead, the feeling of metal stretching as the pinhead got larger and larger. A terrible sound, feeling it racing through my teeth. It was horrible, and the pinhead just getting bigger and bigger. And I kept looking at it as the sound sheared through my body, looking at this pinhead as it totally engulfed my whole sight. And all I could see was the pinhead forcing me backwards, inevitably, as in my other dream, crushing me. But before it could do so, I awoke. And when I awoke, I could always remember the piercing sound. Sometimes remembering the sound in other parts of the day, and remembering the pinhead and the flower getting crushed or crushing me, as the case may be.
I'm on an Italian vacation, hanging around the busy streets of the city, observing different aspects and meeting different people. I'm watching a communist or anarchist demonstration with parade, with placards, and people shouting, kind of getting involved with the demonstrators, but knowing there might be trouble as pushing begins. I hide out in a friend's open house near the street below a table. Some people are looking for me, but I avoid them. An older Italian acquaintance tells me I should leave the area or be careful, because there is another American in the area who might cause me trouble because I might be mistaken for him. He leads me away from the street area to a restaurant, but the food seems to be more Mexican than Italian. It is quite a combination of tortillas, soups, etc., and I enjoy making some soft tacos and listening to the surroundings. At one point, the waitress, who is also an American, comes over and I order a Diet Pepsi. She returns a few minutes later on my right side with my drink as I continue to eat the delicious foods. Someone is with me too, but it is not the same Italian man. This man tells me we must hurry if we are to see the special event. I grab some more food, some chicken thighs and wings on my way out. He leads us through the ancient streets to a sloping area where something is happening. He reminds me to be quiet and not to become involved overtly. I'm still eating. The event area is crowded with people. The main area of interest seems to be the large pool where people are facing in one direction. There are also people on the lawn area which slopes downward off the pool. I remain standing for a moment because I'm short and seem to be unobtrusive anyway, and besides, I want to see. Quickly, though, I'm kneeling on the grass area, and soon after the procession begins, and the master shows up quite near me, in fact, and wordlessly begins the proceedings. Almost magnetically, all of the people begin to swarm in his direction. There's no way to avoid becoming involved now. A chant of Sa-ho or Sa-bo wells up in the background. Like a ball game or concert where too many people try to fit through a gate at one time, I am pushed near the front of the crowd. The master has a hypnotic charge over the crowd, and me too. The crowd is fully under his control now, and suddenly I am pushed to the very front. I'm thinking I hope I look Italian enough as the kneeling devotees glide behind me, moving without moving, sliding through the streets. Magically, I begin to move much faster than those behind me and begin to rise from the ground. It is extremely exhilarating, and almost immediately I am off from the crowd on my own, flying totally off the ground, whirling, sitting in a sitting position like a small aircraft. I'm not that far from the ground, but I am positively hurtling and doing almost acrobatic moves. My heart is racing now, and at one point almost come out of my seat as a rush passes through my body. I see the crowd going in a skewed direction from me as I continue to fly through this historic city.
It was a couple summers ago in Colorado. I was 15. The house I was staying at was a mobile home in a mobile home park set on the very western edge of town. And to the west, there are the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And to the east, there was the very beginnings of the Great Plains. I mean, the contrast was just sharply divided, like you'd taken two disparate photographs and placed them one next to each other. Anyway, there was a highway leading from the road bordering the mobile home park out into the plains, and I was walking along this road. The lights of a suburb of Denver were sparkling off in the distance like some terrible movie. But to me, it seemed to be very beautiful and precious, like I was experiencing something I'd never see again. I must have walked for about an hour and a half, following those lights, wondering what mystery and beauty they had in store. Like there really was something in those lights, something beyond what I had experienced in previous months. I reached those lights eventually. They were simply street lights on dusty, lonely corners. I felt cheated, as though I'd stumbled upon a treasure chest, and upon opening it, found out that it was just another Pandora's box of apathy and boredom. The evening residue of an industrial society. I turned around then and walked back to the house, looking back every so often, and finding that the magic and beauty of a city seen in the distance was still there.
I dreamed I slept with Mama Cass's corpse and Phyllis Schlafly last night. I was hoping that Mama had decomposed enough so that there would be enough room on my queen-size bed. An air pocket popped in her rotting liver and emitted a noxious gas, which reminded me of drinking water from southern Louisiana. We laid lengthwise on the bed so that there would be enough room when Phyllis got there. My ex-girlfriend and her lesbian lover hammered annoyingly on personal computers while we slept. She kept waking me to ask irritating questions about her word processor, while her dyke roommate effortlessly entered data through a push-button interface attached to the computer's faceplate. Two Canadian-looking born-again Christians asked me for a ride. I consented, but insisted that they leave their box of explosives on the roadside. They told me that Larry Clinton was Satan, and that they were bombing adult bookstores all over town. They left some literature and thanked me for the ride. Nazi skinheads converted my bathroom into a large shower area and pushed and shoved their way to the toilets. They left smatterings of urine all over the floor and bathroom fixtures. Some shithead with a tattoo and varicose veins around his mushy brown teeth tried to force me to touch his penis. I wanted to kill him, but there were too many witnesses, so a 2x4 to the testicles had to suffice. Back in the bedroom, the lesbians tried to force born-again car bombs into various orifices of their computers and whined acerbically about the insensitivity of the contemporary American male. Mama's corpse let out a fart, causing peeling brown spots to erupt on the walls and ceiling. I managed to doze back into a distracted state of sleep, realizing that tonight's events had probably not helped property values in my neighborhood.
A lot of times I have dreams where I'm asleep and I know I'm dreaming. So anyway, one time I had this dream where I was at the school where I used to go to. And I knew I was asleep and I was only having a dream. So I figured it'd be fun to figure out the meaning of life. Anyway, I went down these stairs that aren't there really in the school for real. And I went through this door, went down this short hallway, and I saw these people looking over this balcony. And I wanted to see what they were looking at, but also wanted to figure out the meaning of life. So anyway, I went through these double doors, and then I went down this hallway, and I saw these two people walking towards me, and I knew one of them was like some sort of a holy man, because it was my dream, and it could be anybody I want it to be. So I just asked him the meaning of life. I says, "What's the meaning of life?" And he just kinda stared at me. Then when he was just about to speak, something woke me up. So I just don't know what the meaning of life is.
One of my strongest memories is I have this 3-inch scar on my left leg. It's not a long story, but it's not a long scar either. I was 11, maybe 12, and I borrowed somebody's bicycle, and I borrowed my sister's roller skates. You know, the kind of steel wheels that make your teeth bark at one another when rolling down the cracks in the sidewalks. And I'd had the idea of combining the two, calling it bike skating, starting a fad, except somebody in California would steal it and claim it. because nobody would believe some kid from the Midwest could start a fad. And I rolled down the driveway, gathering momentum, gliding off the seat, letting the bike lead the way with me straddling the back wheel. And I came to the point where either I turned on the sidewalk or ran into the ice cream truck that was driving by. I jerked the bike to the left, guiding it to the sidewalk, but not really well versed in bike skating technique at that time. Forgot to jerk my body to the left, causing my left leg to come in contact with the rear fender, which I had failed to notice was rather rusted and rather jagged. In retrospect, I probably should have sued the kid, but being like 11 or 12, I didn't think of it at the time. At this point, there's like blood running down the inside of my leg, and I didn't realize how bad I was hurt at first because, you know, I felt like the pain, but the outside of my jeans were not cut through, and I was wearing these like really high white socks that came up to the part and almost covered my knee. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe like I scratched my leg or something, but I come inside and like there's a 3-inch gash, there's a nerve exposed, and there's blood pouring down my leg, and my mom says, well, I think we better take you to the doctor. And I said, oh, okay. So they stuck this needle in my leg and sewed it up in like 7-8 stitches. And to this day, when I stick my nail in the scar, you know, my thumbnail, and I press it, I can't feel a damn thing.
I was staying at a sheep herding ranch that I'd been to before. A famous underground filmmaker had arrived, causing concern to most of the people there. She looked familiar to me, but I couldn't place her name, so I asked her assistant. When he said the name, I realized I'd recently read an article about her in Sound Choice magazine. She implied everyone would be in her film, but I wondered if this might not just be a ploy to get everyone to help her. We then all went outside to herd the sheep together to shear them. The sheep were so densely packed that I decided to fly over them rather than get in their way. I flew to the edge of the herd where people were keeping the sheep from getting away. The filmmaker was nearby, and I realized while I grabbed a lamb that was escaping that I was being filmed. Then I looked at the lamb in my arms and saw that it was really a large white cat. The filmmaker was furious that she'd wasted her film.
Last night, I dreamed that I was taking all these pictures off the wall in the kitchen, and these 2 spiders jumped down from the wall, and one of them went scurrying into the bedroom, and my roommate's brother was a biker, and he had these big black boots, and he stepped on the spider, and it was a big black spider, and the other one was really pretty, but it scared me, and I crushed it with a bottle of mint oil, and I remember a pile of newspapers by the door. All those bottles of stuff I don't drink, you know? And the tea bag I hung from the ceiling to see if anyone would notice. A cigarette butt scotch taped to the bed. And then I used to walk a lot at night and think about these things I wanted to do. I never did those things. I'd walk a long way and think of things I'd done and wish I hadn't done them. But I had. And that's kind of the way my life was for a while. And I'd buy all these records just because I liked the way the covers looked. And and I remember when they'd make us get out of the pool because we were having too much fun. And a lot of things I don't remember anymore. Well, somebody will come up to me on the street and say, "Hi, Heather, how are you? Remember me?" And I'll say, "No, I don't remember you." And you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to remember them, you know, and I never do. Or you're supposed to pretend you remember them, and then after you talk with them a while, maybe they'll slip and give you a hint of who they are and when you knew them, and if they liked you or not, and if you liked them. But I know this doesn't have a whole lot to do with the spiders in my dream, but, you know, they were really scary. They were big, and they looked like those spiders in the science fiction movies when there's radiation in the 50s and they get giant and they lay eggs, and then everybody goes and hides in the church. Even if they're not religious, it's okay, because, you know, in these emergencies everybody pulls together and they all hide in the church, and, you know, there's a lot of crying and singing and praying, and I guess that's what it's like to be an American, at least in those science fiction movies from the 50s. And I dreamed that my dog made a hole in the wall and was like a big huge mouse, and the floor was a lot cleaner in there than it is in the rest of my house. You know, I used to dream about monsters and skeletons chasing me, and yeah, I'd be scared, but now it's different. It's like I'm more scared now when I wake up. I'd be glad if I didn't have to go to work.
And I was finished, and I was going to get out of the bathtub, but I didn't, because the bathtub was no longer a fixture in my bathroom, but was like a boat that I was in, and we were out in what I guess was the open sea. And I looked off in each direction, and there was nothing but water everywhere I looked. And I floated out there for a long time. And finally I spotted some land off in the distance. And so I paddled over in that direction. And it took a long time, but I finally got to the land. And I got out of the tub and went up onto the land and looked, and the landscape was very flat. And I didn't see anything for as far as I could see, but it was better than floating out in the water, so I started going inland. And I traveled for a long time, and it was just flat land with nothing interesting in the landscape. I traveled for a long time, and finally I saw a building off in the distance. And so I headed in the direction of that building. And it took a long time to get there, but when I finally got there, I noticed that it was a church. I went inside, and there were a lot of pews scattered off in all directions, but there were no people in it. So I was in an empty church. Then I noticed a little light off on the side. And it was a confessional booth. So I went over there to the confessional booth, and I went into the confessional booth, and I knelt down and waited, and I didn't wait very long before the priest slid open a tiny little window. And so I confessed having a very strange experience in my bathtub. And the priest pulled out a gun and shot me.
She had a dream. She kept her dreams very close and secret. Every day she was off to school, but sometimes left adrift by a boring old Torrey, or baffled by some math problem. She dreamed of a man she'd met once long ago. He'd stayed just a day or two, but her mother had married his best friend. She heard stories while she was growing up, and now that the passion of womanhood was stirring in her blood, she dreamed of him. She considered him a romantic character, driving madly across the country in a truck full of music equipment in search of some bright, fantastic future. She liked to imagine he had fallen in love with her and was only waiting for the time she'd be old enough to take as his lover and bride. So what if he was married? His wife would die. In his grief, he would look for comfort, and she'd be there. Nothing's impossible.
We were harvesting something, I don't know what. And she was beautiful. She had long black hair covered with a kerchief and a small oval-shaped face. Big brown eyes, full lips, a small nose, and I said something to her. She looked up at me. She looked at me with those big eyes, and as I watched her face grew progressively older and older, and it seemed we passed through many years of time together, and suddenly, well, not suddenly, then after a long period of time, after watching her grow very old, her face changed into that of another woman's, and I watched that from youth to the end of her life evolve once more, and then her face changed one more time into that of a young woman's, and then I woke up. I never could figure out this dream, but it made me think a lot more seriously about things like reincarnation than I ever had before.